Everyone at the train station rejected the lonely woman. They whispered that she was trouble and told her to leave town. But just when she thought her life was over, a mysterious cowboy walked up with his twin daughters, looked into her tear-filled eyes, and said something that shocked everyone around them: "My twins need a mother like you." What happened next changed all of their lives forever. The woman everyone rejected, until a cowboy changed her fate. A stranger at the station. The wind blew softly across the dusty wooden platform of Willow Creek Station as the afternoon train slowly came to a stop. The loud hiss of steam echoed through the quiet town. Passengers stepped down one by one, greeted by family members, friends, or business partners waiting for them. But one woman stepped off the train completely alone. Her name was Clara Whitmore. She carried only a worn brown suitcase and a small cloth bag. Her dress was simple and faded, and the long journey had left dust on the hem of her skirt. Clara paused on the platform, looking around nervously. This small town was supposed to be her new beginning. She had traveled for 2 days just to get here. But now that she had arrived, something didn't feel right. The people standing nearby whispered quietly while glancing at her. Some of them stared with suspicion. Others simply turned away. Clara tightened her grip on her suitcase. She had experienced that look before. The look that said she didn't belong. The station master walked toward her slowly. He was a tall man with a thick mustache and a serious expression. "You looking for someone, miss?" he asked. Clara forced a polite smile. "Yes, sir. I was told there might be work here, housekeeping, cooking, anything really." The station master frowned slightly. "We already got folks for that," he replied. Clara's heart sank. Oh, I see. She had hoped someone would give her a chance. Just one chance. She walked toward a nearby bench and sat down quietly, trying to think about what to do next. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with deep shades of orange and gold. The train soon pulled away, leaving the station nearly empty. Now Clara truly felt alone. A few townspeople gathered nearby, whispering again. "She must be running from something," one woman murmured. "Women don't travel alone unless there's trouble," another man said. Clara pretended not to hear them. But every word pierced her heart. She had left everything behind. Her home, her past, her pain. All she wanted was a new life somewhere no one knew her story. But it seemed even here, she wasn't welcome. Minutes passed, then an hour. The station grew quiet. Clara looked down at her suitcase and sighed. Maybe coming here had been a mistake. Just as she stood up to leave the platform, she heard something behind her. Two small voices. "Daddy, who is that lady?" Clara turned around. Standing near the edge of the platform was a tall cowboy wearing a dusty hat and a brown leather coat. Beside him stood two little girls, both with golden hair and matching red dresses. Twins. The girls looked at Clara with curious eyes. The cowboy followed their gaze. For a moment, his eyes met Clara's. There was something different about his expression. Not suspicion, not judgment, just quiet understanding. The cowboy tipped his hat politely. "Evening, ma'am," he said. Clara nodded softly. "Evening." The two little girls stepped closer to their father. "Why is she sitting all alone?" one of them whispered. The cowboy looked at Clara again. Something about her tired eyes told him a story without words. He had seen that look before. The look of someone who had lost everything. He slowly walked toward her. Clara felt nervous as he approached. In towns like this, strangers weren't always welcomed kindly. But the cowboy stopped a few feet away and spoke gently. Waiting for someone, Clara hesitated before answering. No, I suppose not. The cowboy looked around the empty station. You got a place to stay tonight? Clara lowered her eyes. I haven't figured that out yet. The cowboy glanced at his daughters, who were still staring at Clara. Then he looked back at her. A quiet thought crossed his mind. The older twin tugged on his sleeve. Daddy, she looks sad. The cowboy took a slow breath. Then he said something that surprised everyone nearby. Ma'am, my girls and I run a ranch just outside town. Clara looked confused. That's nice, she replied softly. He continued. My daughters lost their mother 2 years ago. Clara felt a sudden heaviness in her chest. The cowboy looked at his girls lovingly. They've been needing someone kind around. Then he looked back at Clara. His voice was calm, but sincere. Maybe someone like you. Clara blinked in disbelief. I'm sorry, what? The cowboy gave a small smile. My twins need a mother figure. The girls looked up at Clara with hopeful eyes. And then the cowboy said the words that would change Clara's life forever. Would you consider coming to our ranch? Clara stood frozen. Just hours ago, the entire town had rejected her. But now a complete stranger was offering her a place to belong. She didn't know what to say. And deep down, she had no idea that this simple moment at a train station was about to change all of their lives forever. The ranch beyond the hills. Clara stood silently on the wooden platform, still unsure whether she had heard the cowboy correctly. Come to your ranch, she repeated softly. The cowboy nodded calmly. Yes, ma'am. My name is Daniel Carter. And these two troublemakers here are Lily and Emma. The girls smiled shyly. Clara forced a small smile back, but inside she felt confused. No one had offered her kindness in a long time. Why would you help someone you just met? Clara asked carefully. Daniel leaned slightly against the wooden railing of the station. Because sometimes, he said quietly, people just need someone to give them a chance. His words felt heavy with meaning. Clara looked down at her suitcase again. She had nowhere else to go. The town had already made it clear she wasn't welcome. But going with a stranger, that was a risk. Daniel seemed to understand her hesitation. You don't have to decide right now, he said gently. But the sun's going down soon, and the next town is miles away. The twins stepped closer to Clara. Lily spoke first. Do you like horses? Clara blinked, surprised by the question. Yes, I do. Emma smiled brightly. We have 3 horses. And a baby calf too. Daniel chuckled softly. The girls clearly liked Clara already. Clara took a deep breath. Maybe fate had brought her here for a reason. All right, she said quietly. I'll come. Just for tonight. Daniel tipped his hat again. That's more than fair. The road to the ranch. Soon they were riding in Daniel's old wooden wagon, pulled by a strong chestnut horse. The road leaving Willow Creek was long and quiet. Golden sunlight stretched across the open fields, and the mountains in the distance looked purple under the evening sky. The twins sat beside Clara, talking excitedly the entire way. We have chickens, and a dog named Rusty. And Daddy makes terrible pancakes. Daniel laughed from the front seat. That's a lie and you know it. For the first time in months, Clara felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Warmth. The girls' laughter filled the wagon like music. Eventually the dirt road curved around a hill, and Clara saw it. The Carter Ranch. It wasn't a huge ranch like the ones in stories. But it was beautiful. A wooden house stood near a Red barn, surrounded by fences and open land. Horses grazed peacefully nearby while chickens wandered across the yard. A golden retriever ran toward the wagon, barking happily. "That's Rusty," Emma shouted. The wagon stopped. The twins jumped down immediately and ran toward the dog. Daniel climbed down and helped Clara step off the wagon. "This is home," he said simply. Clara looked around slowly. The ranch felt peaceful, safe. Something in her chest tightened. She hadn't felt safe in a very long time. Dinner at the Carter Ranch. Inside the house, the twins rushed to wash their hands while Daniel started a small fire in the stove. "I usually cook something simple," he admitted. Clara looked toward the kitchen table. "I could help." Daniel hesitated. "You don't have to." "I'd like to." Soon Clara was preparing a simple meal of stew and bread. The twins sat at the table watching her like curious little birds. "Mom used to cook like that," Lily whispered quietly. Daniel froze for a moment, but Clara pretended not to notice. Dinner was surprisingly peaceful. The girls laughed. Daniel told small stories about ranch life, and for a moment Clara almost forgot about the long painful journey that had brought her here. After dinner, Daniel walked Clara to the small guest room. "It's not much," he said. Clara looked around the simple but clean room. "It's more than I expected." Daniel paused before leaving. "You can stay here as long as you need," he said. Clara looked at him, surprised again. "You barely know me." Daniel nodded. "That's true." He paused. "But I know what it looks like when someone's carrying too much pain alone." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Daniel quietly closed the door. A night of memories. That night Clara lay awake in the small bed. The house was quiet except for the distant sound of crickets outside. Her mind filled with memories she had tried to forget. The reason she had left her old town. The whispers. The accusations. The heartbreak. Tears slowly rolled down her cheeks. Maybe this place really could be a new beginning, she whispered to herself. But deep down she knew something. Secrets had a way of catching up with people, even in the quietest towns. The next morning, sunlight poured through the window. The next morning, Clara woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of giggling downstairs. When she walked into the kitchen, the twins ran toward her immediately. "You're still here," Emma said happily. "Of course she is," Lily added. Daniel stood near the stove holding a pan. "I tried making pancakes again," he said nervously. Clara looked at the burned pancakes and laughed softly. "Maybe I should help." The twins cheered. For the first time in 2 years, the Carter house felt alive again. But just as everyone sat down to eat, there was a sudden knock on the door. Daniel frowned slightly. Visitors were rare this early in the morning. He walked to the door and opened it. Standing outside was a tall man wearing a black coat and a sheriff's badge. The sheriff looked past Daniel, directly at Clara. His expression hardened immediately. Well, the sheriff said slowly. "So you finally showed up." Clara's face turned pale. Her worst fear had just arrived at the Carter Ranch. The secret from her past. The cheerful atmosphere in the Carter Ranch kitchen vanished the moment the sheriff stepped inside. Daniel stood near the door, his expression calm but cautious. The twins looked up from the table, confused by the sudden tension. Clara's heart began pounding so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. The sheriff removed his hat slowly, revealing a stern face weathered by years of law work. "Well, Miss Clara Whitmore," he said, his voice cold. "Looks like my search is finally over." The room fell silent. Daniel frowned slightly. "You two know each other?" he asked. Clara couldn't answer. Her hands were trembling. The sheriff stepped further into the house, glancing around before his eyes returned to her. "You traveled pretty far to run away," he continued. "But you can't outrun the law forever." The twins looked nervously between the adults. "Daddy, what's happening?" Lily whispered. Daniel placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's all right," he said gently, though his eyes remained fixed on the sheriff. "Sheriff," Daniel said calmly, "maybe you should explain what you're talking about." The sheriff crossed his arms. "This woman is wanted for questioning back in Red Ridge." Clara finally found her voice. "I didn't do anything wrong," she said quietly. The sheriff let out a short laugh. "That's not what the townsfolk say." Daniel looked from the sheriff to Clara. "What exactly are they saying?" he asked. The sheriff's tone turned sharp. "They say she poisoned her husband." The words hit the room like thunder. The twins gasped softly. Clara's face turned pale as snow. Daniel's eyes narrowed. "That's a serious accusation," he said slowly. "And that's why I've come to take her back," the sheriff replied. Clara shook her head desperately. "That's not what happened." But the sheriff didn't seem interested in listening. "You can explain that to the judge," he said. Daniel stepped forward, placing himself slightly between Clara and the sheriff. "You got proof?" he asked firmly. The sheriff frowned. "Not yet." Daniel crossed his arms. "Then you're not taking anyone anywhere without hearing her side first." For a moment, the two men stared at each other. Finally the sheriff sighed. "Fine. Talk." Daniel turned toward Clara. His voice softened. "Tell the truth." Clara took a shaky breath. For years she had carried the weight of that terrible night. Maybe it was finally time to speak. "My husband, Thomas, was not a good man," she began quietly. The twins listened silently from the table. Clara's eyes filled with tears. "He drank every night, and when he drank, he became cruel." Daniel's expression hardened. "He hurt you?" he asked gently. Clara nodded. "For years." The sheriff shifted uncomfortably but remained silent. "One night," Clara continued, "he came home angrier than ever." Her voice trembled. "He accused me of things I didn't do. He threw plates, smashed furniture." She paused, trying to steady herself. "I was afraid he would kill me." Daniel clenched his jaw. "So what happened?" he asked. Clara swallowed. "I made him tea, like I always did when he was drunk. Something to calm him." She looked down at her hands. "But that night, he collapsed." The sheriff spoke again. "And the town doctor found poison in his system." Clara shook her head quickly. "I didn't poison him." Tears streamed down her face now. "I never would have done that." Daniel studied her carefully. He had spent years reading people on the frontier. And right now, he saw fear, pain, but not guilt. "What happened after that?" he asked. Clara wiped her tears. "The townspeople decided I was guilty before anyone asked questions." She looked toward the window, remembering. "They whispered, accused, judged." Her voice broke. "So I left." The sheriff sighed again. "That's still running from the law." "I was running from people who already decided my fate," Clara replied. The room fell quiet. Daniel looked toward the sheriff. "Sounds like you don't have much evidence." The sheriff rubbed his chin. "That's true." Then he added something unexpected. "But there is one thing." Clara froze. "What?" Daniel asked. The sheriff reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded letter. "This arrived yesterday," he said. Daniel opened it slowly. His eyes moved across the page. Then his expression changed. "What does it say?" Clara asked nervously. Daniel looked up at her. It says the town doctor made a mistake. Clara's breath caught. The poison wasn't in the tea, Daniel continued. It was in a bottle of whiskey. The sheriff nodded. Your husband had been drinking from it earlier that night. Clara's knees nearly gave out. So, I'm not. No, the sheriff said. You're not guilty. For a moment Clara couldn't move. Years of fear, shame, and loneliness suddenly lifted like a heavy storm cloud. She covered her face and cried. The twins ran toward her immediately. It's okay, Emma said softly. Lily hugged her arm. Daniel looked toward the sheriff. So what happens now? The sheriff placed his hat back on. Now, he said, now she's free. He walked toward the door before pausing. Sometimes towns get things wrong, he admitted quietly. Then he stepped outside and rode away. The Carter ranch became silent again. Clara wiped her tears slowly. I'm sorry I brought trouble here, she said. Daniel shook his head. You didn't bring trouble. He glanced at the twins, who were still holding Clara's hands. You brought something else. The twins looked up at him eagerly. What? Lily asked. Daniel smiled softly. Hope. Clara looked at the little girls, then at the quiet ranch around her. For the first time since arriving at Willow Creek, she felt something real. Maybe this place could truly become her home. But none of them knew that the hardest test of all was still waiting for them. The moment that changed everything. After the sheriff left the Carter ranch, a strange silence settled over the house. Clara stood near the table, still trying to process everything that had just happened. For years she had lived under the shadow of a terrible accusation. And now, suddenly, she was free. Daniel leaned against the doorway, watching her carefully. You all right? He asked softly. Clara nodded, though her eyes were still wet. I never thought I'd hear those words. What words? Lily asked. Clara looked down at the little girls and smiled faintly. That I was innocent. The twins hugged her again, as if they had known her forever. Daniel cleared his throat. Well, he said, trying to lighten the mood, we still have a ranch to run. Emma giggled. And Daddy still makes terrible pancakes. Daniel pretended to be offended. I'm surrounded by critics in my own house. The room filled with soft laughter. For the first time in years, the Carter ranch felt warm again. But life on the frontier was never peaceful for long. A sudden storm. Later that afternoon, dark clouds gathered over the hills. Strong winds began sweeping across the open fields. Daniel stepped outside and looked toward the sky. That storm is coming fast, he muttered. Clara followed him onto the porch. The air smelled like rain. Should we bring the animals in? She asked. Daniel nodded. I'll check the horses. The twins ran into the yard with Rusty the dog, chasing each other while the wind blew their hair around. Girls, Daniel called, stay close to the house. But children rarely listened perfectly. A loud crack of thunder suddenly shook the valley. The twins screamed in surprise. At that exact moment, the barn door slammed open from the wind, startling the horses inside. One frightened horse burst out of the barn and began running wildly across the yard. Girls, move, Daniel shouted. But the twins froze in fear. The horse was running directly toward them. Everything happened in seconds. Daniel tried to run toward them, but he was too far away. Clara didn't think. She ran. With all the strength she had, she sprinted across the yard toward the twins. Clara, wait, Daniel shouted. But she didn't stop. The horse thundered closer, hooves pounding against the dirt. Just before it reached them, Clara grabbed both girls and pushed them hard toward the fence. They rolled safely onto the grass. But Clara wasn't fast enough to move away. The horse struck her shoulder as it passed, knocking her to the ground. "Clara!" Daniel yelled. The horse continued running across the field and disappeared into the storm. Daniel rushed toward Clara as the rain began pouring down. The twins ran beside him, crying. Clara lay on the ground, breathing heavily. Her arm was bleeding, and mud covered her dress. Daniel dropped to his knees beside her. "Are you hurt badly?" he asked urgently. Clara winced but shook her head. "I'll be all right." The twins hugged her tightly. "You saved us," Emma sobbed. Clara brushed their wet hair gently. "Of course I did." Daniel stared at her, his expression filled with shock and admiration. Most people would have run away. But she had run toward danger. For his daughters. A realization. That night the storm passed, leaving the ranch quiet again. Clara sat at the kitchen table while Daniel carefully wrapped a bandage around her shoulder. "You should rest," he said. "I'm fine," she replied softly. The twins had already fallen asleep upstairs after the long frightening day. Daniel finished tying the bandage and sat down across from her. For a moment neither of them spoke. Then Daniel finally said what had been on his mind all evening. "You didn't hesitate today." Clara looked confused. "What do you mean? You risked your life for my girls." Clara looked toward the stairs where the twins slept. "They needed someone." Daniel studied her face. "You're stronger than you think." Clara smiled sadly. "Life doesn't give you much choice sometimes." The lantern on the table flickered gently. Daniel leaned forward slightly. "My daughters lost their mother 2 years ago." Clara nodded quietly. "They miss her every day." He paused before continuing. "And today, they nearly lost someone else they care about." Clara looked at him, unsure where the conversation was going. Daniel took a slow breath. "When I met you at the station, I thought maybe you could help around the ranch." Clara listened silently. "But now I realize something." "What?" she asked. Daniel's voice softened. "You didn't just help my daughters today. You became family." Clara's eyes widened. Daniel stood up slowly and walked to the window. Outside, the moonlight shined across the quiet fields. He turned back toward her. "I know we barely know each other," he said. "But life on the frontier teaches you something important." "What's that?" Clara asked. Daniel smiled gently. "Sometimes the right people arrive when you least expect them." He walked closer and placed his hat on the table. "Clara Whitmore." Her heart began beating faster. "My daughters already see you as the mother they lost." He paused. "And I see someone brave, kind, and stronger than most people I've ever met." Clara's breath caught in her throat. Daniel spoke the words slowly. "You don't have to wander anymore." Then he asked the question that would change all their lives. "Would you stay here, not as a guest, but as part of this family?" Tears filled Clara's eyes again. Just days ago she had arrived at Willow Creek with nothing but a suitcase and a broken past. Now she had something she never thought she'd find again. A home. A family. Clara nodded softly. "Yes." At that exact moment the twins appeared at the top of the stairs, half awake. "Did she say yes?" Lily whispered. Daniel laughed. "Yes, she did." The girls ran down the stairs cheering and hugged Clara tightly. Rusty barked happily beside them. And for the first time in many years, the Carter Ranch felt complete again. Please friends spot my channel, subscribe for more stories. Like, share, comment.